Okay, so before I go to cinema to see X-Men Days of Future Past, I'm going to quickly watch Bryan Singer's X-Men and X2. Otherwise, I might just get myself a bit chronologically confused.
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
So I just got back from cinema after watching what I thought would be X-Men 3 as I don't count the third movie. Guess what? Actually, it's X-Men 2? Or is it X-Men First Class 2? Is it X-Men Reboot? X-Men Zero? X-Men Point 5? I have no idea. Let's have a look at it. Okay, so I've calmed down after watching X-Men Days of Future Past twice in quick succession, and taken a few days to return to it and try to put a leash and a muzzle on my inner fanboy, who on occasions can take a young priest and old priest to be brought under control. Either that or I just have to watch a Michael Bay Transformers movie and he goes off and sulks in the deepest, darkest corner of my psyche until he has showered the shame off of himself. So having taken time to really reflect on the film and look at it from various angles, both as a movie, an adaptation and a studio tentpole, it now gives me the opportunity to give you my objective, rationalised reaction to it, rather than my fanboy reaction. It was phenomenal, it was incredible, I loved every second of it! And here's why. X-Men Days of Future Past is based upon the 1981 The Uncanny X-Men storyline that ran from issues 141 to 142, where the world has gone to shit and most of the X-Men are dead. Kitty Pryde transfers her conscience back into her younger self in order to prevent the world going tits up. However, in the film they send back Wolverine. Why? Because he's the fucking Wolverine. Marketing schmarketing, I don't care how cynical this could be seen, it's Wolverine. So X-Men Days of Future Past sees the cast of X-Men and X2 reunite, and Bryan Singer, the director behind the first two and best entries into the franchise, back in the director's chair. X-Men The Last Stand was the last of the actual X-Men movies to be produced following the traditional sequential sequel story flow before the spin-off slash reboot Wolverine movies. Seriously, the studio had zero choice but to greenlight a spin-off to reboot the X-Men property post Brett Ratner's deplorable third installment that failed to impress critics, engage fans, and also didn't exactly fill Scrooge McFox's money bin with crisp dollar bills. However, no one really could have predicted what came next. I mean, had my future self appeared to me one day and told me just after seeing X2 that I would see a threequel to rival Batman and Robin, I may have given him the benefit of the doubt and listened to him, as third films traditionally do bring down a franchise. But then if future Steve had said, wait, there's more, then proceeded to tell me that there would be a standalone Wolverine origin film that was, well, for argument's sake, as bad as X-Men 3, and this meant it was so bad that 4 years later they would have to do another Wolverine film, just to reboot the franchise's most marketable character. I would have told Mr. Future Me to go fuck himself, or myself. However, little did I know that 2014 Steve hadn't finished telling me the future of the X-Men franchise. No, because then he says to me, oh, but in between these two Wolverine films is an X-Men as a team reboot, which is also an origin story for a Brat Pack style cast and explains how and why Charles Xavier and Eric Lehnsherr turned from friends into bitter enemies. Oh, and it's set against the backdrop of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, I would have thought my future self was lying and actually from Motivation Corp and beat the shit out of him. Jeez, and here we are now in 2014, 9 years after X2's release, and I am apprehensively stepping into the time vortex, knowing full well that I'm going to receive the same beating I gave myself when I was 2003 Steve, because all that actually happened. So finally all that mess is over and has been erased. Bryan Singer has taken his flux capacitor and pushed Brett Ratner in front of a car and rewritten the X-Men film universe. I mean, to a point where I'm not sure there's any precedent in Hollywood for what he has actually done. In 2006, Bryan Singer flew around the earth to erase Superman 3 and The Quest for Peace from the movie canon, thus just removing a couple of undesirable entries into the Superman storyline to connect with Superman 2 and go from there. With Days of Future Past, he has not only gone Terminator on Last Stand, Wolverine Origins and The Wolverine, he has pretty much discounted his own films. It's a complete new film universe, starting from X-Men First Class. Still no fucking Gambit though. I know other directors have done this, like when Nolan rebooted Batman, but no director I can think of has ever rebooted a franchise like this while retaining the entire original cast. So why is this film so good? Firstly, it's a massive summer blockbuster that does not get distracted by its shiny CGI and feel the need to blow its entire budget on destruction porn. You may say, well, Magneto lifts an entire stadium and drops it on the White House lawn, that's kind of like destruction, Mr. Steve. Well, yes, it is destruction, but it's not pornographic. It's also similar to a scene in Superman Returns. Maybe Bryan Singer just likes guys lifting things. It is Eric displaying his power in a shock and awe show of force in a very dramatic way and giving the audience some tension. Also, it is backed up by one of the best join me speeches of the X-Men movies. Michael Fassbender owned that role by the end of this film. He has completely encapsulated the character, full of youthful anger, blind ambition, political rebellion and hate that so many people in the real world have at that time of their lives. And all of this is his motivation for what he does and how he justifies his actions. This real universe age and mindset parallel was wonderfully offset by yet another superb performance from Sir Ian McKellen, who portrayed Magneto towards the end of the character's life, with the realisation that all of his bitterness, angst, fury and aggression had led to nothing but wasted time and at the cost of his relationship with Charles, i.e. he was a dick for 30 years. The stadium destruction is not just us watching Magneto go Michael Bay, Zack Snyder on a city. In those destruction porn third acts, and don't hate me for saying this, but even in the Avengers slightly, the characters begin to get a little lost amongst the action, as it's kind of like the action takes centre stage and the characters get told to fuck off for a tea break while the action steals the show. Whereas X-Men Days of Future Past never has one action set piece that isn't completely character focused and driven. In Man of Steel, we lose all connection to the characters for up to like 10 minutes at a time as the film becomes a giant fighting game. Also, the action is not just size matters, the action is pretty damn inventive and gets the heart pumping and your inner child all excited like he's just found a Spider-Man toy in his Kinder Egg. You aren't just watching cities get fucked up, the film brings innovation to its action like the first Matrix did. When I first saw the opening Sentinel attack and the use of the survivors' powers being used in coordination, especially Blink's portal jumps, I was like, wow! Tell me the last time you saw something like that. I bet the list isn't as long as how many cities were destroyed in the third act of a film in the last 10 years. Secondly, this film gives us characters. They are the perfect blend of serious, funny, charismatic, and all the relationships just work and do not feel forced. The comedy is so perfectly timed, never goes too silly nor distracts from the drama of the plot, nor does the comedy ever just feel like the filmmakers got stumped and needed a joke to keep the audience engaged while nothing was going on. Every character gets an equally respectful incarnation, and one of them is suddenly reduced to being a Jar Jar Binks just because the studio demanded a comic relief character to sell toys. You feel the complexity of Charles and Eric's relationship. You get to see Xavier struggle with past events and the burden of his powers. Again, it was a wonderful contrast between the two former friends and how they are coming to terms with the climax of First Class differently. And Beast and Wolverine's relationship gets a true depiction on the big screen. Thirdly, Quicksilver. Man, if this guy isn't cool as shit, I will not spoil anything in this part because Evan Peters has given Marvel a major headache with this. He was cool, smart, funny, witty. In fact, he came across as having all that same screen presence and having fun with a role that Dirk Benedict used to bring to his 80s TV characters. He knows he's good and he's damn good at what he does in this film. The only issue was that he was only really used for one segment of the story. I think maybe that Marvel had something to do with that. You see, Quicksilver's appearing in the Avengers sequel, Age of Ultron, played by Aaron No Charm Johnson. However, this raised legal issues over ownership of certain Marvel characters. Disney now own Marvel. However, when Marvel was independent, they divided up their character roster and licensed them between Fox and Sony. Fox got X-Men, Daredevil and the Fantastic Four. Sony got Spider-Man and Ghost Rider. Oh, and Universal got Howard the Duck. Now, since Quicksilver appears in X-Men and Avengers story arcs, damn if that don't be a pain in the ass for the legal department. So Fox was perfectly entitled to use Quicksilver for this film, as he is in the X-Men roster. I just wonder if, since they hadn't used him before in a motion picture, they had to strike a deal with Disney and limit his screen time. Like, you can rent Quicksilver, but you can't keep him. To be honest, it doesn't matter, because even if Marvel did do this, the 20 odd minutes we get of him, fucking hell, Bryan Singer, did you use him? Aaron Taylor Johnson's Quicksilver could have 20 movies and I doubt he'll ever win people over as much as Peters has managed. And finally, Sentinels. Fuck me, this should have been the first storyline on anyone's mind back in 2000. I mean, come on. Even the animated series knew that Sentinels were crucial to X-Men. I cannot believe it's taken top Hollywood executives 14 years to find and deliver what a 9-year-old would have done in a heartbeat if handed the project. But this doesn't matter because they are here now and fucking hell did they rock. Not as massive in stature as the ones in the cartoons, but solid reworked designs, and the ability to adapt to mutant powers was actually great. Normally I hate when they mess around with perfection, but this time they actually improved upon a masterpiece. I'm a fan of the TV cartoon and the films. I'm not quite sure if they ever did have this power in the comics, so don't hate me. I'm not pretending to be wiki.marvel.git. So yes, I loved it. It's one of the best superhero films ever, and it set the bar really high for what a summer blockbuster has to deliver in 2014 onwards. Okay, so where do we rate X-Men Days of Future Past on the Affleck curve? Well, congratulations, highest ranking live action film of 2014 so far. So, X-Men Days of Future Past, you equal Argo Affleck. Don't know what the fuss is about, I quite enjoyed Superman Returns.